Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Pathways to Net Zero. I'm Monica Ferguson, Associate Editor at Annex Business Media, Canada's largest B2B media company. I'm here as your host on behalf of Food in Canada. Before I introduce today's panelists, I have a few housekeeping details to go through. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Biomera, for their help in making this webinar possible. To our participants, if you're watching along with us, the audience is in listen-only mode. We will be answering questions at the end of the discussion, so feel free to drop any questions at any time using the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom window. If we don't have time to get to your question, we will follow up via email. We are recording today's session, and all registered participants will get an email with a link to the recording in the next few days. I'd now like to welcome our panelists. Our moderator for today's webinar is Leslie Ewing, Executive Director at Plant-Based Foods of Canada. She has assembled a unique organization that includes manufacturers, ingredient companies, VCs, brokers, distributors, and retailers in the mission of growing the plant-based segment in Canada. Bruce Taylor is the president and founder of EnviroStewards Inc. It's a classified B corporation and the only Canadian company to win a global SDG award. He has also founded the Safe Water Social Venture Project that was featured in Be the Change magazine, Meta magazine, and a TEDx talk. Christine Cuvelier is the president of Trendy, where the mission is to rescue food and feed the world. With over 40 years of experience, she is the past executive chef of President's Choice, director of culinary and beverage executive chef at Cara Operations, and the chair of the chef school at George Brown College. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. I'm going to pass the floor over to Leslie to kickstart the discussion.
Thank you for the introduction, Monica. At Plant-Based Foods of Canada, we know that plant-based products that our members produce are part of the solution to some of the world's most pressing problems. They're generally easier on people and planet, with lower land and water impacts and carbon emissions. So before we jump into the questions, Bruce and Christine, can you take a few minutes to tell us about how your company fits into the pursuit of net zero? Where are you on this path, and how do your efforts support others? So start maybe with Bruce.
Sure. So EnviroStewards is an engineering company, and we help folks on basically the entire journey. So if you can imagine, a lot of the folks indicated that they haven't yet started making commitments. So if you go to a mall, the first thing you need is that map of you are here. If you want to get to the food court, you got to know where that is and where you are to plan a route. So same thing with your business. What's your initial footprint? And what's the biggest parts of it? And then what do you do about it? So we do kind of opportunity assessments, decarbonization of where strategically can you intervene in an affordable way, and then help you get it implemented. We put permanent metering in so that you can monitor the progress, know when you're falling back, those kinds of things. And then even the final step of the journey. So we do development work in East Africa. We teach people to build water purifiers with the local materials, which basically you could plant a tree, but how about don't cut the tree down to boil the water? And you get the added social benefits of jobs, employment, health, all these kinds of things. So kind of we help manufacturing facilities for the most part. Example would be Maple Leaf Foods. So they're the first large food company in the world to be carbon neutral. We helped them get there in 2019, and they report that they've saved $17 million so far, and they're carbon neutral. So again, anybody can get you there if you want to spend money, but if you want to save money, you need kind of this efficient approach. And so that's kind of our role in this. Oh, and then, sorry, I forgot to mention food loss prevention. So we had a Walmart Foundation grant, and we did 50 factories across Canada, and we found an average of 230,000 per factory of food that did not be wasted in the first place. This can be kept in the food supply, and you save the whole greenhouse gas footprint of growing those ingredients in the first place, and you get that money to improve your margins of your business. So that's another aspect of it, I guess.
Great introduction. Christine?
Thanks, everyone. Glad to be on this important webinar today. I'll tell a little bit about why and how I became so passionate about food and passionate about this industry and how it fits into Trendy. So yes, I'm an executive chef. I'm a global culinary trendologist, and I've worked with some of the largest food companies around the world: President's Choice, Cara Operations, George Brown, Unilever, Maple Leaf Foods, and many innovative foodpreneurs. And I'm always looking to the future. I'm very externally focused. I'm thinking about what's happening next in the industry. So here we are in this situation where we grow enough food in the world and we cannot feed everyone in the world. And as a chef, that hurts my heart to think that we can't do that. We at Trendy are all about rescuing otherwise wasted fruits and vegetables from the farm level. We know that a great deal of what we grow does go to landfill and other, doesn't make it to manufacturing, doesn't make it to a gourmet or grocery store shelf, and ultimately doesn't end up on a consumer's dining table to share a wonderful meal. So at Trendy, we work with the farmers. We find out the wasted, otherwise wasted products, and we rescue them. We transform them into a powder through a number of drying technologies, but let's think about freeze drying first off. We know that shipping product commodities across a country to a manufacturing facility is costly. It's shipping weight, it's shipping water. So to be able to transform the otherwise wasted fruits and vegetables into a powder, your shipping is less. Now we have that wonderful powder. It's a solution. It's an ingredient that can be used in manufacturing, can be used at food service ends, and really it's full of flavor and full of vitamins and nutrients. We don't add anything to those powders. It's strictly the rescued fruits and vegetables. So to companies who are looking to achieve their statement of reducing their food waste goals, this is an ingredient. This can go along the path and be included in how they're talking about their products. We understand at Trendy that food waste is a global issue. It's not something that's just happening in our Canadian backyards and on our Canadian farms. But we're all about solutions and we're all about collaborations, because as an industry around the world of people who are passionate about food, we have to come together to solve this as a group.
Terrific. So let's dive into some questions here, and we'll cover off a few areas and then we'll check to see what questions we have from the audience and tackle those. So, why net zero? It is, we know that ESG reporting is now table stakes for companies, from consumer perception, from investment. It is a must do. So how does the pursuit of net zero fit into a company's overall sustainability strategy? Is it strictly a way for companies to demonstrate and report tangible results to stakeholders? And to date, where has most of the focus been? So, for example, Christine, you just talked about, one of the obvious is reducing impact through transportation. By shipping dried ingredients versus ones that are containing water and have a larger, greater emissions. So maybe we'll start back with you, Christine, to cover off sort of this particular area.
Certainly, yes. So let's talk about manufacturing. For instance, say you were manufacturing a tomato sauce. That's fabulous. You're shipping a perishable product across a country to a manufacturing facility. You have to find refrigeration, potentially freezer space, and you have to use that product fast. So eliminating that weight saves not only money, but it saves production time in the manufacturing side to be able to use a powder instead of a commodity. We're not saying that we don't want to ever use fresh tomatoes or fresh apples, but just because an apple doesn't look like a Chanel boutique apple that could be perfect and end up on a shelf, there's no reason that we can't all work together to contribute to rescuing produce that doesn't fit the definition of a perfect piece of produce. Those companies who are manufacturing, they have standards and they have goals. We have been working with a company here in Vancouver, and in using our ingredients, they've decreased their labor cost straight away after 2 months, because you can have an ingredient that can be then put into your product development process. It's key to think about changing the paradigm shift of how we think about manufacturing and how we think about ideation and innovation. We have to do something right now, and Leslie, you said, it's a timely topic. Absolutely. The time is now. Many major food manufacturers have stated they want to halve their food waste by 50% by 2023 to 2025. They're late. We have to do it now. We know it takes a long time to steer a big ship and change a product development process and change innovation. We have to come together and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, for those on the call, we had a conversation prior to this about today was sort of the optimum time to be talking about this based on the air quality warnings that we're dealing with right now. So Bruce, to the same thing to you, your company is really sort of part of that support infrastructure to help companies guide them through from point A to point B. So how are you seeing sort of that net zero fit into overall sustainability strategies with companies, and where has the majority focused? So Christine just talked about sort of mitigating food waste and changing manufacturing processes. What are you seeing? So in terms of how it fits into the sustainability strategy and where companies are focusing in order to drive this?
Yeah, well, I would agree with what Christine said. Like we do water, energy, product. Food waste prevention is the fastest return on anything we do. Water is faster than energy, and then energy is big also, but food waste is the fastest. And we also do upcycling. What else can we do with this? But before you upcycle, let's keep it as grade A #1 product first, right? And as we said, we did, we found 240,000 per factory. You have 1 year payback to not waste the food. And 1/3 of the food on the planet is wasted now, and 1/9 of the people are undernourished. So today we're wasting 3 times more than we've take to feed everybody on the planet 3 times over that doesn't have enough food, without converting any more land to agriculture and biodiversity, all these kind of things. So that would be big. But as far as ESG, why now? Customer pull. So you probably see that with your plant-based foods movement, right? Growing interest in these types of things. And you'll see Maple Leaf has a labeling on their bacon and these kinds of things, right? Investor demand. So you'll have seen the things from BlackRock kind of on their advice where, they say, we're not actually environmentalists, but the things you would do to do it, you're actually a better investment for us. Because really, if you want to do this type of stuff, you have to look at the long-term game, not the next quarter, right? And companies that do say we're a B corporation, B corporations outcompete their peers on profitability, job retention, everything like that. Not necessarily because they're B corps, but because of the long-range view of creating sustained value that you need to focus on doing that. So, kind of investment. It's easier to get investment if you're doing these types of things. Employee attraction and retention. So every food company in Canada is 10% understaffed right now. And every time somebody leaves, you have the added burden of retraining the next person. And so Harvard says that one of the most valuable things about environmentalism isn't necessarily environmental, it's the ability to use it to teach your organization to continuously improve. Basically, environment's on everybody's list somewhere. It's not the top of their list, but it's on their list. So it's a way to collaborate across silos. Once you do that on this one, you get that experience and you can do it on other initiatives. And so those are some of the reasons why to do it now. I've been doing this for 30 years. The name changes every 5 or 10 years. I don't really care what the name is. We just keep doing, conservation is, prevention is always the best, thing to start with, no matter what you call it, if it's eco-efficiency or whatever it is, right? And so today, what's called sustainability, whatever you want to call it, or net zero, whatever it is, what's the most rational way to get there in an affordable way?
So you mentioned that food waste was probably the greatest impact. Are you seeing that as a primary area of focus within the industry?
I would, except there's in the environmental movement, there's kind of blind spots. So the blind spot on food waste is, Christine talked about these commitments, 50% reduction by 2030 would be the champions, 12.31. Often there's a blind spot of people are using diversion percentages. If you reduce food waste, your diversion number goes down instead of up because you were already diverting it to animal feed or something like that. If you keep it in the food supply, mathematically, your diversion number looks worse. So say like we did Campbell Soup, we avoided 1,000 tons a year of food being lost in the first place. It's now, could be in cans being sold. It's better for society, the environment, and economically, just not on the reporting structures. And again, on these things, people will report if the food waste goes to a destination, you track it. If it's no longer generated, you don't track it anymore. So it disappears. If you were to track it, it would every other metric, it would outperform it 10 times over, economically, environmentally, socially. So we advocate for actually measuring it. We've measured it before. Let's make the change and measure it after, and just keep accumulating the economic, environmental, social benefits of that. And so you have to make a conscious change to actually value prevention over diversion, right? And one way I illustrate that is in the met with the Food Industry Association. So imagine a room full of processors. Says, everybody got $1? And somebody will give me a loonie, and I give them 5 cents back. Says, anybody else got $1? Give me $1, I give them 5 cents back. Anybody else? I just keep going until they stop. That's the entire waste management industry. If I can get $1 of food for 5 cents, it makes sense to run my digester. So it makes perfect sense for the digester. But why does it make sense for the processor? Let's keep that as bread, as protein, keep it in the food supply. There will be some residuals left over, and let's manage that appropriately. But let's first maximize, keep this food in the food supply.
Absolutely. Christine, before we move to the next question, did you want to add anything to what Bruce has said?
Sure. I love what Bruce says about this topic. And, when we think about food waste or we think about upcycling, people say to me, oh, is that a trend or a fad? It's neither. This is where we are, and this is what we have to deal with right now. So I like to use the word rescue a lot, because when we talk about waste to food, there's an educational portion, particularly in consumers' minds. Oh, if it's wasted, can it be edible? And why would we want to upcycle it and then eat it? So we in this industry have a responsibility to also educate and to talk about farmers and to talk about the fact that, thank goodness, farmers replant those fields every year after what we know goes into landfill or doesn't get sold to go onto a shelf. And Bruce is nodding because I know we think the same about this. In talking to a farmer, it's not unheard of to be on a phone call with a farmer who says, we have 329,000 kilos of carrots wasted into landfill every Friday. And yet every year they continue to replant their fields. So we're responsible for talking about this as being an immediate need we have to come together with. We are responsible for talking about the fact that it is rescued, it is edible, it is fabulous, full of vitamins and full of nutrients, and we are putting it in landfill or other. And one of the best things about being in this food industry is ideation and innovation. Thank goodness we can always think of something new. We can always think of what's possible to be able to do something new in the future. So, we talk about what's possible at Trendy, because when we end up with that powder or a puree of rescued fruits and vegetables, it's just the beginning of amazing creations that can be put into place in manufacturing or in food service operators. I love getting on the phone with R&D chefs or chefs at a food service location after we've sent them samples, and they call and say, oh, it can be used in smoothies and cocktails and mocktails. I can put it as a rub or a drizzle, or put it in a marinade, put it in every day part from breakfast, lunch, dinner. And we all nod and we all say yes. And the light bulb goes on above their head. So that's what is exciting about being in this industry, because we always can innovate and we can always do something new. But right now, we have to address this food waste and speak about the solutions. And discussing it like this together is collaborative. And that's how we're going to get forward and move this needle forward.
So both of you have sort of mentioned, if we think about what are the challenges to reaching net zero, particularly for the food industry, one is education, and that permeates so many different areas. But education on the immediacy of the need, that this is not a fad, it's something that is coming like a freight train, and have got to do something about this. Reporting. The long game versus short game, and the pressure from a return perspective based on the way companies currently report. And ideation and innovation are maybe an opportunity and a barrier at the same time, because when you talk about education, right, there's probably some work that needs to be done there. So what other challenges are there to reaching net zero, particularly for the food industry? And how is Canada measuring up versus other jurisdictions? Christine, we just talked about the fact that you do a lot of speaking and different events, North American, internationally. So challenges to reaching net zero, and where's Canada on this? And whichever one of you would like to start, maybe I'll go to you, Christine.
Sure. Well, stats are really just words on a page until we can make action. But we know that in Canada, 58% of the food that we grow is wasted. So the opportunity and the amount that we can rescue is huge. By being at trade shows around the globe, there is a buzz and people are talking about what happens with the food waste and what happens with innovation. And really, we hear interest and excitement and enthusiasm to work together, to think about a solution, to put these rescued ingredients or to put a solution for these rescued ingredients in place in a company. It's not that the interest is not there, it is. But I was at Expo West in Anaheim in the spring, and we were talking about the buzz around the Upcycled Food Association. And it's fantastic that they have an accreditation that, yes, is in the States and has now come to Canada. Again, having an education around it. What does that mean for your company? What does that mean as a supplier? How can that benefit you? And if it's not benefiting you, how can we tweak it so it does? We need everyone to jump in the same boat and row together. It's interesting when I compare hearing people talk in North America versus around the world. At Gulf Foods in Dubai last fall, upcycling was a buzzword. Sustainability was a buzzword. And these major companies came from around the globe to be able to discuss it all together. And the number one thing they talked about was education and getting the right message out there. So webinars like this are perfect for that, but it can't stop after this. This is only the beginning of a conversation, and we should all come, a challenge to the audience today would be, how can we all come together and discuss this and move this forward? Bruce, I'm sure you have ideas around collaboration and such.
Yeah, wonderful. And I would say Canada is both at the forefront of this and just as behind as everybody else. So say like we did Bimbo Canada, and we did every factory they have, so 18 bakeries across Canada. And there's a case study if you want, we can give a link to it later on. So that's the first within Bimbo, which is a global corporation, and the other ones within it are catching up. But on the other hand, there is 0 programs in Canada on food loss prevention. And there's 0 emphasis on it. It's all kind of, how do we avoid sending food to landfill where it will turn into methane and be worse than CO2? But that's only 10% of the footprint. 90% of the footprint is agricultural that you don't get back unless you keep it as food, right? And not grow other food to replace that. And so the messaging is kind of off. And so the stakeholders themselves are the manufacturers. But because the messaging is off, they don't realize the opportunity that's available. And the other is the metrics. So say like one of those Bimbo factories, they had excellent metrics on where their waste was, how much, but the dollar assigned was the disposal cost, not the value of that bread in the first place. Once you change that, then it changes the priority level. So it's too low a priority for everybody because you're using the management cost versus the opportunity cost. So the very first thing you have to do is, what's the opportunity cost of this process change right here, right? And so you want to get the right dollars on it kind of thing. And so say like Smithfield, we did Smithfield sausage. They were already met your 50% criteria because they say if you send it to animal feed or to rendering, then it counts as, right? So 100% was going to rendering, but we cut the total amount to rendering by 30% by keeping it in the food supply, which is much, much better than sending it to rendering. You get 10% of it back as food, after so many translations that later on kind of thing. And so there's just this lack of emphasis on the top rung of the hierarchy of the food waste prevention at all levels. There's no programming, there's no messaging around that. That's the best thing actually for your margin for your facility. One other one while I'm at it would be just another exercise I do is I'll ask people, if you were to sell your first grade A product at full price, or you're going to take some product that was previously lost and sell that at half price, which one would you make more money on? You'd actually make 5 times more on the one you sold at half price than your full grade A product at normal price. But people are so scared of cannibalizing their sales that they don't want to focus on kind of discounting and these kinds of things. But you actually make more money on that, because that doesn't even count your disposal cost avoidance, but you've invested everything. You might make 10% on what you make, but if it was previous loss, you lost 100%. And so kind of rethinking the process at a business management type of level first to raise the priority level, and then get right down, you know, around the globe, there's lots of stuff on kind of general guidance on housekeeping or this or that, but that doesn't lead to change. Specific, this process here is losing it at this spot for this reason, and here's the remedy, here's how much it would cost, here's how much it would save. You have to get to that level of root cause analysis to actually get the actual change.
So this is great conversation. You know, we hear this a lot about, you know, the key to solutions is collaboration, right? Everybody working together towards a common goal. And so, you know, you just talked about the fact that it's almost, it's not infrastructure support, but sort of more education support. There's a lack of, and messaging that is targeted, relevant, and understandable by the intended audience.
Yeah.
So we think about, you know, there are a lot of criticisms of the pursuit of net zero and sustainability and things like that. But we are at a critical point, and we keep emphasizing this. So how do we ensure that this doesn't become a check mark on a box, and we're continue this ongoing push for better results? So based on the conversation that's happened so far, we need programming, right, to support loss prevention. We need messaging for companies. We need enablers for collaboration, right? Authentic ways to bring companies together so those conversations can happen and how they can work together. What else beyond those areas to ensure that this actually continues to move forward and doesn't become the check mark and eliminates any kind of criticism that is out there?
Yeah.
I love how you said enablers for collaboration. That's a fantastic phrase. We often at Trendy use the phrase pioneering partners. Who wants to discuss this? Who wants to work on a solution together? Who wants to come up with an answer? And so I think that that's a now and into the future. But at the same time, I often am thinking about the next generation who are going to come into this industry, who are going to be manufacturers or chefs or innovators or food waste champions. And what are we doing to set them up for success? As Bruce said, there's nothing out there right now to teach people how to do this. So what can we do to ensure that they are paying attention to what they're going to inherit and have to continue on to provide solutions and successes? One of the things that we've been doing is having food waste challenges with culinary colleges across North America. So sending them some of our ingredients, some of our powders, and saying for a semester, there are no rules, just innovate and have fun and experiment and ideate around these products. And then we come in on the last day of the semester and have the presentations made. And it has sparked change at university campuses. It has sparked a directional change for some of those students who are going to inherit this industry about what they want to do. Holland College in PEI did this challenge. And at the end, the students went to the dean of the whole college and said, "This is amazing. Do you know that we have to do something about food waste? at this college, not just in the food department, but in the whole college. And that has sparked a change. Conestoga College did our challenge, and they loved it so much that they want to have these ingredients as part of the ingredients used in the curriculum to the students in all the programs. Well, that's fabulous. It sparks an idea. It sparks innovation. We're talking about taste, and we're talking about solutions.
It's interesting because when I say about the sort of enable collaboration, that's really why our organization got together, because we were at an event and said who wanted to be part of the conversation on how we work together to do this, and every hand went up, and we had to figure out how we brought everybody together and how we could continue, how we could advance that. So, a big thing here, so that it's not passive, it sounds like a call to action is really required. Incentives, healthy competition always works. Bruce, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Interesting you mentioned Conestoga College. So in parallel, without knowledge of what you're doing, we were also working with them to figure out the greenhouse gas footprint of every meal. So based on the ingredients kind of thing. So they actually put it on their menu, but also we actually went there for a meal, and as good as you are at preparing it and having less loss at the back of the kitchen there, what are we throwing out at the end? Where does this butter go, this sour cream, this, bread and whatnot? And so what people don't realize is waste is always the outcome of a system. It's the intended outcome or the unintended, but it's always an outcome of a system. So if you want a different outcome, you have to change the system. So we did this, one of the case studies I put in the chat is restaurant chain in Mexico. And they did, this wasn't actually ours, we were just reporting that one. But the other ones in there are ours. And so they measured the waste first for a shift. And then they got the operators, the servers together and said, okay, well, let's see what it is, right? And then the next shift was just them talking to the customers. And so a lot of the waste was one certain type of platter, and it was just, hey, when they order, just say, this is kind of what it comes is that really what you want? Oh, no, actually I wanted this instead, right? Or, a lot of it was 5 different kinds of salsas, right? Well, which one do you want, right? Or which ones, right? Or the second serving of the tortillas, right? The first one gets used, right? When you ask for more, they give you the same amount the second time, and most of them get wasted. Or, so you're coming up with the root cause that's generating that outcome. And you don't have to, customer satisfaction actually went up, not down, because you have better interaction and whatnot. Nobody actually wants to waste food. We did a nursing home, and people actually feel like, they use the word sin, even, you're actually damaging them by, you have to have this size portion, whether you can eat it or not. You know what I mean? And so in their case, half the food didn't actually get a chance to be eaten. So you could buy twice the quality of ingredients, right? With the same investment per day that you're allocated, and get better nutritional outcomes. So you always have to look at the system. What are the biggest ones? What's the root cause? And then change it. And so that's kind of the approach we used on the food loss side. On the carbon side, we would say there's too much emphasis on the last mile. Everybody's talking about carbon neutral and whatnot. You're immediately thinking about solar panels and offsets and whatnot. That's the last mile, not the first one. And carbon sequestration is even after the last mile. It's not even, everybody's talking about you should remove as much carbon from the air as you're putting in. That would be great if we weren't putting the equivalent of 1 million battleships per year into the air. That's how much is going in. It doesn't make sense to start trying to take it out with a teaspoon when you've got a 6-inch hole in the bottom of your lifeboat, just sending a gusher. Let's work on the hole. But all these programs are requiring, you're supposed to draw out as much as you're putting up, which would be great on this one infinitesimal type of thing. But you get 30 times more benefit from $1 spent on prevention versus cures economically. So you can do 30 times more environmental benefit if you make your investment strategically. So part of the problem is just starting off in the wrong avenue. Even solar panels, we don't have solar panels on our roof here in Elmira. We put them on the roof of an orphanage in South Sudan. There's twice as much daylight, so there's twice as much energy from every panel there. And Ontario is 10% fossil fuel. They're 100% fossil fuel. That's 10 times more benefit. So we get 20 times more environmental benefit from every solar panel on that orphanage. Plus we get social. Now you don't need to put fuel in this generator to run your water pump. You can spend it on food, right? And so, and they didn't create this problem, we did. Our emissions per capita are much, much higher, but they're experiencing more than us because they don't have irrigation and these kinds of things. So there's an equity angle where are you going to make that investment for the last mile? And that's where the credibility comes in, right? So to be credible, you have to do deep conservation first, right? Quick wins and strategic deep conservation measures. Our own office, we've cut it 88% per employee. Then we offset the remainder, right? And that's where the offsets are credible. You've already, we're down to 4 tons for our office, right? And it makes sense. One water purifier in Africa avoids 4 tons per year of emissions over there to boil the water, right? That's much better for that last mile, but don't start there, right? And so first start with that. And that's the lucrative stuff anyway. That's what's going to pay for the rest of the journey is these deep savings. And so there's just kind of lack of awareness of where to start. And you really need to start on this lucrative conservation first, just not use the energy in the first place. And if you did use it, let's use it again. Every kilowatt hour of electricity you buy turns into heat. And then in your food industry, you pay to get rid of that heat from your ammonia system or whatever it is, right? Instead of paying to get rid of the heat and then buying other heat, why don't we use that heat again to heat water, heat air process, whatever it is, right? So reduce, then reuse, then recycle and whatnot. But we're starting with recycle, the opposite thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you answered one of the questions that was there already because they asked how energy, the question was, how does energy fit into the overall food processing piece? And I think you pretty much answered that. So there's a whole lot of questions here. So before we sort of get into the last question that I have, I'm going to start going through some of these. So some of them are very specific. Some of them are for both of you. So I'm going to start, Christine, just to start. There's 2 questions right off the top that are for you. Does Trendy have multiple drying facilities across the country? And then also, are you facing specific food safety requirements or audits for your process and product?
I'll start with the second question first. So Trendy's processing manufacturing facilities are CFIA approved. So we've covered that off. Right now, currently, we are rescuing fruits and vegetables from a series of farms in Ecuador. So we're not just dealing with this in the Canadian or North American boundaries. And in Ecuador, we work with a series of farms to rescue the fruits and vegetables. These farms are run by women on the farms who hand pollinate a number of the commodities and are paid a Western rate wage so that they can support their families. So that's a feel of the story, as well as having access to extraordinary fruits and vegetables from the Ecuador market. So that's where we currently are set up. We have a number of ongoing feasibility studies and conversations of people who want us to set up facilities across Canada, across Europe, across North America. So we encourage anyone to jump in and have conversations with us. As we're selecting locations, we think about not only your commodity, but your neighbor's commodities and the harvest schedule. And so if this facility can take all the commodities from the neighborhood, you might have blueberries in May and someone has strawberries in June and apples in July, that's great. Let's be able to work together, whether it be a co-op of farms or just neighbor farms, to be able to really rescue the greatest amount. Then we do studies and we look at, well, if we had large facilities, we would be able to take 2% of the waste. We can run these 24/7. There is so much waste. So it's not finding the location, it's finding the right partners to be able to help from the farm level and the connection to the manufacturers to have that ingredient be used.
That comes back to collaboration again.
It does, doesn't it?
Partners. Yeah. So this is a question. So there's several here. So how are you reducing your scope 1 and 2 emissions in processing facilities?
Is that a Christine question?
It says it's not specific to you, so I will, put it out there to both of you, sort of Bruce,
Mhm.
companies that you're
Yep.
working with.
I can
and
start, I guess.
then-
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So scope 1 is anything you're emitting directly yourself. So the biggest one would be if you're burning natural gas or propane or something for fuel. But other things in that would be refrigerant loss if you're leaking some shunt vehicle fuel and some minor kind of stuff. Scope 2 is if you're causing somebody else to use energy to give you electricity or water or district heating or something like that. So most cases, scope 1 is your biggest part of your footprint once you do your analysis. And so first of all, you want to look at where are we burning gas now? And the good news is you can often save much more gas than electricity. And it's got a bigger environmental benefit. And the reason is because all the electricity is turning into heat anyway. So first of all, you do a steam balance if you're making steam out of it, or natural gas balance at least. Where is it actually going? And then you've got your Pareto principle, your 80%, 80% of your problem is, due to 20% of your consumers, right? So let's find where it is and what are we using steam for? And then you go all the way back to what job is the steam solving for us? Can we solve that job differently? Can we get 3/4 of the way there with waste heat and then just use steam for the last bit? So basically you're going to minimize it as much as possible. And then you're going to consider fuel switching to say like electric boiler or something like that for that last little bit. But then you run into the problem of your electrical supply. So then you also do electricity conservation. There's the easy stuff like lighting or stuff like that, but your refrigeration system, your compressed air system, there's often a lot of opportunity there. So basically your biggest consumers, and you go all the way back to the root cause of what is the energy solving, or water. This water is moving this from there to there. Well, we can move it a lot easier with a belt, right? Or we're filling and dumping this. Well, can we use a high efficiency nozzle? Or so basically this conservation first is the best way to go with kind of that energy thing.
Okay, Christine, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Just
Okay, so Bruce, sticking with you, there's another question here. What are your customers using their enhanced information about status and progress for, or what is their motivation to invest in that direction?
I would say that at the end of the day, you actually need a credible story. It's all about storytelling, right? So Trendy is about storytelling, right? Like you're trying to help people understand that. And that's how people understand anyway, for thousands of years, that's how we communicate, right? And so to do that, you need a credible story. So before you get your marketing involved, do your homework and cut your footprint in half, right? And do something compelling like that in Ecuador, and hey, we're not buying this off the open market. We're partnering with this project here that's helping these individuals. And if you want to go visit, 2 of our customers came with me to visit our project. So PepsiCo Foods Canada, their sustainability manager, came with me to South Sudan. And even Tim Hortons Canada, their engineering manager, came with me. You'd be lucky to get 5 minutes in their office and they're going to go with you for 2 weeks, right? It's because people also have this inherent desire for purpose, right? And so you want to, so at the end of the day, you need a credible story. And so that's kind of, eventually, I think that's what people are using, because say Maple Leaf's the first one there, but after the first one, it's how you got there that's actually the story, right? And so you want to, have the metering so you can document that story and you have it credibly, and you want to partner accordingly. What's a project that's aligned with our purpose, that we can tie it all into one common story, not environmental over here, social over there, economic over there. It's all ESG together.
I love that, Bruce, because story is how it comes to be, how it comes to life. We have our mobile processing unit that's a 53-foot. It's not exactly a small mobile unit that can go and be placed at farms. And it's our testing facility. We have the freeze drying capability in it. We have the processing in it, and we can go and visit farms, or they can come to us and we can do testing in this. It builds the story. That plants a seed in their heads, and those potential pioneering partners can go back to their management group at the farm or their farm co-op, or if it's an ingredient manufacturing company, can go back to their R&D teams and say, wow, I saw this, I tasted this. Now I can think about what we're going to do in the future. So it's all about that storytelling.
So this feels somewhat like a build on the question about how do we ensure this doesn't become just a check mark, right?
Mhm.
So you talked about, Bruce, minimizing the focus on the last mile only,
Mhm.
and looking at the start, but then
Mhm.
also it's the credible story that backs up what you're reporting, not just the check mark.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say on just on that one, I would just say have an author friend, Brett, and the way he communicates it, Brett Wills, is you don't want a sustainability plan for your business. You want a business plan that's sustainable.
Hmm.
If you have a business plan that's sustainable, everybody in the business is working on that plan, right? If you have a sustainability plan, it's one person over there that nobody wants to talk to because it's just adding to their workload. So think about your business plan itself. How can it, plant-based, it'd be good. Every time we make a thing, we reduce this footprint, right? And so if your organization itself has a sustainable business plan, then everybody's working on it without adding to their work, and they're adding to their appreciation for the work they're doing because it's more meaningful. When we roll out these things, so we did a meat factory, and when we rolled it out to the floor, it wasn't, okay, if you do this, it's going to save $100,000 for the company. It's, you can run your job like this and it's perfectly safe and fine. If you run it like that instead, 53 people get to eat for a year, right? Once you've got the metrics, you can do that kind of thing, right? Where it's, and the nice thing about food is it's very impactful economically, environmentally, socially. So we have like 9 different metrics we use, depending on the audience. It's the same data, just say we did Labatt's in London, we report their effluent on cases of Budweiser beer that it would take to make that much effluent. Because nobody cares about BOD, but cases of beer, And so you want to speak the language of whoever it is you're talking to. And the same metric can be acres of agriculture output, greenhouse gas, embedded water footprint, meals, jobs supportable. How much would you have to sell to make that much profit if you just didn't waste this in the first place? And so work on your metrics, and that feeds into the story also.
Great. Love that. Don't sustainably plan, build a plan that is sustainable. Great phrase. Okay, so we've got a few other questions. There's no way that this session was going to happen without plastics coming in here. So there's 2 questions here about this. So let's start with the second one. Where does packaging and bioplastics fit in the grade A, keeping in food first, when government is moving responsibility for recycling and waste to producers?
I would say if your plastic can actually have an impact on food loss prevention, then you're going to have a tangible, measurable outcome, right? If plastic isn't required for that, then plastic's going to be a burden on that chain, right? And so if you can actually get to the, X% less is being lost in your CRISPR, then yes, plastics. And for me personally, I would say I prefer plastics that can remain in the plastic chain rather than composting it or whatever afterwards. You're just taking a valuable commodity and turning it into dirt, right? And probably not even particularly good quality dirt. I don't know what it would be, right? There's other sources of dirt, right? And so keep your aluminum as aluminum. It's 10 times less footprint than new aluminum, right? And so if it's a plastic molecule, let's keep it as a plastic molecule. Let's not send it off to the developing world and hope for the best.
We hear this question often when some people ask us about, well, that's great, rescuing fruits and vegetables at the farm level, but can you come to our hotel chain and deal with the waste that goes out the back door? And oh yes, it may contain plastics. So then those problems become one when you put them together. There are amazing innovations being made right now on being able to separate the plastics out of food waste from something like a hotel, because that's a large quantity of waste. But in previous days, it hasn't been so easy to separate out that plastic and still being able to process the food waste portion into an edible future ingredient. So we're working with companies who are they're like in Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory Innovation Labs coming up with this, because it's so interesting to think about both ways. We also can turn the table and talk about these powders that come after rescuing the fruits and vegetables can be used for so much more than just human food innovations. Those powders, depending on how they're dried, can go to animal or nutrition, that can go into fertilizer, that can even go into creating the upcycle in fabric, that can go into cosmetics and the beauty industry, using a natural product in that kind of innovation. So depending on the user, we can alter the drying method to match the needs. But plastic is a big one. It goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. And there is another question here, but it's more about the sort of making sure that you're capturing the full picture. I mean, the question is asked, for example, food manufacturing consumes an incredible amount of single-use plastics. And they took this down right to right into the apparel that staff are wearing, and how the average worker uses 12,000 square foot of single-use plastics per year. It's out of sight, not seen by the public. How does this get addressed? How do you ensure that it's a holistic picture of actually what's happening?
We have a nice case study of High Park Brewery in Toronto. So they were using, they were getting their beer bottles in cardboard cartons, right? And they would fill them up and put them back in the cartons and use them for sale and stuff. And so, and that required somebody to break down these boxes afterwards and all that kind of stuff. Eventually they were able to change over to milk crates, custom made milk crates with High Park Brewery right on the side, right? And by doing that, they could buy their bottles in bulk for cheaper than they were buying them in these cardboard crates. They don't even need to hire somebody to break down the crates and find a recycler for them, kind of thing. They got the marketing benefit, because when the customer has this crate with their label on it, they're more likely to come back and fill it again. And so they report, I forget the numbers, it was like $25,000 or $50,000 a year for a tiny brewery savings. And so that comes back to, in what you're describing, going back to the root cause. Do we need a single-use plastic for this purpose? Can we get something reusable? Can we, there's challenges with each of that, but first start with the biggest one. Like, of that big number you had, is 80% of it gowns, or, what's the biggest ones? And then what are our options on that? So you're spending your attention on your biggest problems, going back to the root cause to basically first eliminate it in the first place.
Right. Okay, so we are coming up on about 5 minutes left in this session. So I have one question left, but there is another really good one here that, so based on the case studies and work to date, how do you see the agri-food index that is being worked on, working to bring consistent reporting across the industry? Consistent data reporting and communications without greenwashing. I'm sure you both are familiar with the Agri-Food Index that Dave McGuinness and his group is working on.
I would start by saying, hearing ideas and hearing examples in case studies is first off. Just think of the case studies we've talked about today. And now everyone on the call looks at this in a different way and says, wow, look at these successes. How can I be part of that? How can I borrow with pride some of those examples in those case studies and implement them in my own business? I think that's one of the biggest learnings. Is we love to tell stories. Let's celebrate the successes out there and tell more people about them, so that we can action it going forward in our own businesses. We can action solutions, and we talk about collaboration so much today. We can collaborate, and then that, I've seen a couple of the other questions on our Q&A today talking about the government involvement and what in federal and provincial governments is out there. Well, these case studies and our voices together are going to instill change going forward.
Yeah, and I would just say on that, consistent metering is good, right? So the cost of metering has come down so much, like orders of magnitude. And so it's much, very, very affordable to put a permanent meter on your air compressor, on your refrigeration system, on your boiler, on your largest consumers that you have some control over, and leave that meter forever. And send yourself text messages. There's something wrong with the air compressor. The leaks are now 27%, right? There's something wrong with our water. We have a baseline. It never goes below 20 liters a minute, even during a shutdown, right? And so you can get this knowledge from this permanent metering, but also you can get the total metrics you need for your reporting. Very often, we had a customer, and half the sustainable person's job is just chasing all the plants to get their data, right? Now you have it live right on your dashboard, on your screen, minute by minute, not once a year or once a month or whatever. And so it's come down so far. And so we're developing our own platform. There's lots of platforms out there. Ours would be more that whole journey, all the metering in one place. So, instead of go over here for your electricity, here for your water, here for whatever. But basically you start with where are you now? You're implementing this stuff, you're tracking it, you're getting notifications if you fall off, your progress, and then how do you offset the rest and, assign that you're actually neutral now, kind of thing, right? And so that whole journey, and what's your status with respect to your target and your starting point? And you have to change that starting point if you bought a new business unit. So anyway, that's what we're doing, and it's an alpha version right now. But I guess metering is your friend, and pick the strategic places to meter and value what's going through the meter accordingly. This is chilled water. It's not worth the water rate. It's worth the cost of buying the water and chilling it. This is hot water. This is condensate, whatever it is. So you assign the right value to whatever you are metering. And then that helps you with that metering later on, your reporting, sorry.
Great, thanks. So we are coming to the end. I'm going to give you this is a bit rapid fire, so kind of 30 seconds each. Both your companies offer solutions support to getting towards net zero. And there's in the chat, I can see there's lots of people are responding about different federal government opportunities for funding. Sort of 30 minutes each, 30 minutes each, oh my gosh, 30 seconds each. Is there anything else that you want to add to provide for the participants in the webinar in terms of places they should look for support, of course, besides your companies, but anything else that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I would suggest that the Food Shift program was very successful. We just, we did, I don't know, 10 applications, and 9 of them were approved under the program, and 8 or 9 of them, and they would get $50,000 of 50% co-funding. And all we had to do is demonstrate the greenhouse gas, scope 1, 2, or 3, ingredients or electricity or gas. So that was good, but hopefully it'll get topped up and they'll offer it again. But there is one open right now called NRCan Green Industrial Facilities and Manufacturing Program, Track 2, that came out a couple of weeks ago, 50% up to $10 million. And the deadline for submission is July 31st. And so we're just, starting to prepare some draft applications for our customers but it's open to anybody. You just want to make that strong, clear case that you're reducing greenhouse gas. Enbridge, if you're buying natural gas from them or somebody else, most of these have co-funding for the assessment and the implementation. Many regions have water conservation programs. We've been a provider for all 5 of them in Ontario. They'll co-fund both the assessment and the implementation because it's cheaper for them to pay you to use less water than to get more themselves. Electricity ones come and go. Right now they're a little bit off, but hopefully they'll come back again to help you reduce electricity consumption.
Great, thanks. Christine, do you want to add anything to that?
Great suggestions. I think that it also, the funding and the grants are out there. Ask, call, and find out, because often we don't know until we ask. And Bruce has given great examples today. I really look forward to continuing this discussion with anyone on our call today who wants to talk about food waste solutions, wants to talk about rescuing fruits and vegetables, wants to talk about where those ingredients can be used in manufacturing. Anyone can reach out. I'm at christine.trendy@trendy.com.
Perfect.
So we are at 2:00. I think this brings us to a close. Monica, I don't know whether you want to say a couple words.
Thank you, Leslie, for facilitating today's insightful conversation. And thank you to our panelists, Bruce Taylor and Christine Couloupier, for your time today and insights into the pathways to net zero in the food industry. Many thanks to our sponsor, Biomera, for the support in putting together today's webinar. And a reminder that a recorded video of this presentation and discussion will be emailed to attendees over the next few days. Before you leave, please share your feedback about the webinar and in the survey that will pop up when the broadcast ends. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.